Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I'm your host, Lucas McCann. With me today, the founder and CEO of Visionary Leadership, Seth Kahan. Welcome to the show, Seth.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
The pleasure is ours. I'm looking forward to this. As I often do, let's turn the microphone your way. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, Seth. What's keeping you busy day to day? And maybe a little bit about how you found this crazy world of associations.
Sure. So I worked at the World Bank for 13 years. I was involved in global change there and got to see really large projects fail and succeed both. When I left the bank in 2002 and went out on my own, and initially I was going to do large multinational organizations. So like I worked 2 change projects at Royal Dutch Shell. But I missed my family and I live in Washington, D.C. And I decided to zero in on the association world. First of all, because I've always been a community person. And associations are kind of a business way. The trade associations and professional societies are all about community. And so that attracted me in itself. And then the idea that I would be spending a lot more time at home than traveling, those 2 things were kind of a winning combination for me. And I got involved and I loved it. I've worked with over 100 association CEOs in the last 20 years. I just think professional societies and trade associations are amazing organizations. So that's what brought me here, and I stayed.
That's a fabulous win-win. I understand the Washington, D.C. area as if you know anything about association. I kind of generally say we probably have 70% of the association headquarters from a national perspective here between Washington, D.C., Old Town Alexandria, and the surrounding areas. I live here as well. It's a wonderful space for that community, and I love that word. It's a business community, which has a personal feel, but I think there's a lot of personalness to it. And there's small businesses that I say that do really large things. So I understood why you came back and why you stuck around. I've done the same. So tell us a little bit more. 20 years working with over 100 CEOs. That's really impressive. Even if it is a hot pot, they got to building trust and entering that community. And tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day work here with associations. Give us some examples.
Sure. So I started out in strategy and innovation because that was my area of focus when I was at the World Bank. And that's a particular passion of mine. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I got interested in grand challenges. And that was spurred by Chris McEntee when she was the CEO of the American Geophysical Union. She wanted to do what she called a grand challenge to really make a difference in the world with Earth and space science. And what she was really hoping to do was to bring together local leaders who had a need that required a scientist and then a third party who could pay for the scientist, because a lot of times local leaders don't have a budget. And so I helped her to build out what's called the Thriving Earth Exchange. You can find it on the web at the Thriving Earth Exchange. And it was really the first grand challenge. It was just tremendously exciting because you saw her harnessing the value and talent, experience, expertise of her members for the betterment of society. And that really turned me on. So I stayed in that space. And I've now been involved in 5 grand challenges, 4 of them in the association world. The current work I'm doing is with Stop Stigma Together. You can find it on the web at stopstigmatogether.org. And it's about eliminating the stigma around mental health and substance use disorders on a national scale. And it's very exciting. Working with the Ad Council, who did Smokey Bear, Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk. The original Rosie the Riveter was the Ad Council. And they now have a series called Love Your Mind, which has at least 7 years of time as PSAs on television. And they just signed with 11 different sports leagues. And now we have athletes coming on TV talking about their mental health challenges and the importance of taking care of your mind and how it's your most important asset. So I spend probably 60 or 70% of my time really involved in that. And it's very rewarding, as you can imagine. And then I have a couple of other association engagements that I'm working on. I'm doing one where I'm doing change management with an organization that's implementing some policies that could be controversial with some key constituents. And I'm helping them to mitigate the risk around that and to do it in a way that really brings along as many people as possible, as many vendors and members as possible into the new world they're creating. And with another organization, I'm helping to redo, or I should say at this stage, re-examine their governance in light of a major expansion in their operations, including moving into other countries around the world. I'm very excited about that.
That's great. I mean, it's just some of the stuff that you talk about that you're getting into, I think seems really exciting. Talk to us a little bit about, getting those engagements started. I can imagine there's probably a little bit of push pull, right? Sometimes you get into an engagement maybe and you go, think bigger, right? I often like to just push people to think bigger, broader, more impact. Let's dream, wave the magic wand, as I often say with folks, wave the magic wand. What would it be like if you could just paint the picture exactly how you want it? And then are there instances where you're going, wow, they're pulling you along, or what's sort of the mix there?
Yeah. So in the early days of a grand challenge, I really work with the CEO and the leadership to kind of imagine all of the players that would have to be involved to be exceptionally successful. And so with Stop Stigma Together, looking at mental health, we wanted the CEOs of the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations. And because of my work over the last 20 years, I knew them personally, so I could actually pick up the phone and call them directly.
That helps.
So we got Arthur Evans and Saul Levin involved immediately, as well as several other associations. ASTHO, the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, for example. And so the first step was, if you were going to be wildly successful, who needs to be like on our side? So we took the largest mental health organizations in the United States. Those two of those I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And we invited the leaders to come and participate in the very first meeting. And we got over 90% acceptance. Wow. The second thing is thinking about Stop Stigma Together faces the American public. So our target audience is 350 million people. So the Ad Council, we want to do public service announcements for the entire country. And we got them involved. And then the government, you want to get the government involved as soon as you can because you want them in the early stages. So when it's time to introduce or amend legislation, they're already on board and they understand what's happening. And we have gotten OSHA. We have an official alliance with OSHA, and they're expanding into the mental health space. The Surgeon General knows what we're doing and just recorded the introductory video to our last summit. And the Department of Defense, the Department of Education. These are all, of course, major players in DC, and it's wonderful to have them involved. So this is the kind of thing. So it's really if we were going to be wildly successful, who needs to be on our team? And then let's go out and see if we can bring them in. And I'll just say, sometimes I have to go looking. For example, I knew for mental health, especially given what's going on in our country right now, that I wanted LGBTQ folks in the room. So I went cold calling to the Human Rights Campaign. And first I called the CEO and I couldn't get any response back. I mean, it was a cold call, call.
You're going big.
But then I thought, let's call her assistant and I'll just tell her what I'm doing. And you can always get the assistant, right?
Yeah.
So I called her and I told her what I was doing. I said, put me in touch. And she put me in touch with Ellen Kahn, who's the vice president of partnerships. And Ellen Kahn has been on our national leadership team for 2.5 years now. So I was really proud of making that connection and making sure that I had an organization that I knew I wanted involved. But that's the kind of thing that I'll be involved in. Is a lot of networking, making calls, and engaging people in the kind of the core social mission of the Grand Challenge.
I mean, it's a great place to start. If you want to do something big, you've got to bring people on the team that can make a real impact. I think we're at a unique advantage maybe in Washington is you could reach out and touch a lot of folks, and the government's pretty close by. And if you catch them in the right time, they're even in town.
And not too much hot air blows you away from them, It's
right. Good luck.
Although this is a very exciting time right now that we're in particular in that space.
Yeah. Interesting time to try to get the attention of the government as it relates to mission, or it may be the perfect time as it relates to getting attention and differentiating candidates in a presidential election year.
Yeah, that's right.
Both a challenge and an opportunity, maybe.
I know from my time at the World Bank, when we would switch presidents, I learned that it was a time when most people wanted to dial things down because they were afraid there'd be major mandate changes. But what I learned was it was a great time to move under the radar and get things done because nobody was really guarding the fence or the gates the way they normally do. And you could really push through some amazing stuff as long as you were willing to not be super visible. And that's something association leaders excel at, is leading from behind. So there's quite a bit that can be done in an environment, even when there's big change.
Yeah, you may not be able to take down, the whole animal, but maybe some smaller bites along the way that help lead you to the promised land of getting your initiative pushed over and accomplished after we get past the election.
Right, right.
Who is there an evaluation of the association itself going into a new engagement? How can you tell if an association is ready to take on a grand challenge or maybe not ready?
Yeah, that's a good one, and it's something that I'm alert to. I certainly have been called in a number of times when I've had to say I don't think this is right.
Hmm.
First of all, they have to be able to fund it. So, and funding can be done on a shoestring. I've worked on a number of grand challenges where there was almost no money to put aside, and we were really working on passion.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to be some core, like administrative support. They have to be able to hire me. There's some elements that a little bit of communications and PR.
Yeah.
Second is that it has to be aligned with their mission. So if, the Plumbers Association wants to do something on, I don't know, mental health, let's say, I'll just pick that.
Yeah.
While it's related, I mean, there's mental health is for everybody, but it doesn't make sense that the plumbers would do it. However, if they wanted to do a grand challenge on like water infrastructure, that's a no brainer. It's like, that's a perfect fit. Yeah. So it's got to be aligned with their mission, and there has to be a ripeness in the larger world. Like right now is a great time to be doing mental health because it's in all the major newspapers. Athletes are coming out around it. And after COVID, everybody's concerned about it. So there's this ripeness. Yeah. And the last thing is that it's really important that the organization be thinking about it as an identity element, not just a project. Mm-hmm. Project can be run, closed, and you can move on. An identity is something that is always part of who you are and something that you always want to give to. So, for example, the American Nurses Association did Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation. They're still doing it. And it is part of their identity. They are not just about providing nurses with the tools and skills they need, but they are about making sure that nurses are taking care of themselves. And so there's got to be this like deep identification that goes beyond just a project.
Yeah.
But those are some of the elements that I'm looking for when I'm interviewing an organization that's interested in a grand challenge.
And with any challenge, right, there has to be a goal. Do you consciously or unconsciously set a minimum threshold in terms of the distance? Like, can it be grand if I can do it in 6 months, or does it need to be a 5 or 10 year that, to your point, gets woven within the fabric? It becomes part of your identity and brand, and this stays with you ongoing.
Well, the purpose is to attack something that's intractable. So the sooner you can do it, the better. I always say, if we could do it in 5 seconds, that'd be ideal, Yeah. So it's like you want to do it in as little time as possible. But then some things like, for example, with mental health, we're looking at federal legislation. That's going to take upwards of 20 years before you really start to see the impact. But with Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation, their goal is to measurably improve the health of America's 4 million nurses. It's reasonable to do that in under 10 years, to measurably improve the health. Mm-hmm. You're not saying that you're reaching a particular point, but that you've touched nurses and they're all doing a better job of self-care in the various domains where that's important. So it can definitely be done in shorter periods of time. And it also depends on the audience, because you may have a very small association that, let's say a trade association that has 50 members, and that the members are fully committed to the grand challenge. You might be able to mobilize them and get something done in a year and a half. Whereas with the mental health organization, we're anticipating 20 years or so.
Yeah. How just funding, I can really appreciate associations wanting to do more. Everybody's typically already strapped. The budget cycles for associations, if you're not familiar with them, can be a challenge.
Yeah. Right.
And we're typically planning 18 to 24 months out as it relates to bigger initiatives, bigger projects, because we have to go through that process of setting budgets through committee and so forth. How often can you tap into grants? I mean, some of the things that you talk about are grand enough that I feel like there should be grant money out there available for these.
Yeah, there is. And sometimes there's serious money that's out there. For example, right now, we have federal funds that are out for solar power and other forms of alternative energy, thanks to the recent legislation that Congress pushed through and the president signed. There's deep funding if you were to try and, for example, have a grand challenge to get as many people as possible to adopt solar energy on their homes. Grants are an important element of any grand challenge. Usually you're looking at philanthropists, you're looking at grants, and you're looking at other organizations. Most associations don't have deep pockets,
Right.
or even if they do, they're not going to go all in one area. They're going to want to spread it out. And so you really need to look at other sources. It can be really challenging with the American Nurses Association. Again, we had a really challenging time with funding. However, I learned after I left the organization that Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation drove more money to their foundation than anything else that they had done in the recent past. So that was interesting to see that, the nurses who were members and their families really valued that initiative and were willing to give based on it.
Yeah. If you don't have that, I mean, I heard you mention that there is opportunities to do this on a quote shoestring budget, and I can appreciate that. What does that look like? How does it change the grand challenge? And do you have an example or two of something that an association could tackle or has tackled through your partnership with you that didn't take 7 figures of funding or so forth?
Yeah. Again, I'll come back to Healthy Nurse, Healthy Nation. I think that we stayed probably under $300,000 a year for the first few years on that. These things run on passion and commitment, neither of which has a dollar amount attached to it. Now, other organizations have to be able to ask their staff to be volunteers. And so that's kind of an in-kind contribution, but it's not, You're not writing a check.
Right.
It means that instead of meeting at the resort when you do your summit, you're going to meet at the Best Western. And associations are used to that, right?
Yes.
I've attended plenty of meetings that were great meetings where the infrastructure for the meeting was pretty sparse. And if people are excited and they're involved in something they find encouraging, then that can really lift it and go. And you don't need a resort to do this. It's nice. Everybody likes it, but you definitely don't need it. It's not required.
Yeah, we have a small Hilton Garden, inn across the street from our office, and that's a fine place to have a meeting. But most pieces, if we're going to have a meeting, let's go. We're in Northern Virginia. Let's cross into DC and do it at one of the more grand locations, or go into Old Town where there's a lot more happening. But there's a time and place for both.
That's right. There is. And to do good things for the world, you shouldn't have to have a big price tag. You really just want that commitment and that passion.
Yeah. Is there a particular project that stands out you're particularly proud to be a part of, that you said, and it could be ongoing, but hey, we achieved the following, and I think everybody that was a part of that just felt really proud?
Well, all of the grand challenges I've been involved in fit in that category. I worked with CFP Board of Standards to create the Center for Financial Planning under the leadership of Kevin Keller, the CEO there. And that was an initiative that was designed to bring women and people of color into the finance profession. And they're getting great results with that now. So I'm very proud of that. Working with the Intellios certification organization, they certify people who use medical ultrasound and sonography. And they're looking at, a medical ultrasound device is the best way to look inside the body without actually cutting it open. And there's one that's been patented for $100. So they are going to be replacing stethoscopes around the world. And then patient safety becomes an issue, because I know the only thing I've ever looked at in a sonogram where I knew what I was looking at was a baby. Right. Everything else, somebody had to explain it to me.
Even then.
Yeah.
So which end is what? I couldn't tell sometimes when I'm looking at those things. Yeah.
So we want to make sure that people who are using these devices know what they're doing and that they're taking good care of those patients. So that was an extraordinary initiative, still going on. But the part that I really got a chance to work hard on was with midwives and nurses and ultrasound specialists in Kenya. And we were specifically focused on lowering infant and maternal mortality, which we have done. So when you think of actually saving lives, that's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
So those are some.
Those are great. I would think in the private sector, there's maybe more funding available, right? Where there's profits, there's other programs, and that it may be there may be some advantages to working with associations that we don't think about, because again, these private sector corporations that have all the funding, so we can really have more impact. What is the advantage, though, of working on a grand challenge specifically with an association? What advantage, if that's even the right word, would they have?
Well, first of all, they're almost always a neutral arbiter. So, if a single pharmaceutical company rolls out a grand challenge, then everybody suspects this is a PR job. You're
It's
really,
self-serving, right?
yeah, exactly. And an association, of course, can convene many pharmaceutical companies. So
Hmm.
you have a lot more, you have a larger pool to draw from.
Yeah, the diversity. Yeah,
But you also, they can all trust the association to be doing the best thing for the space, not just for an individual organization. And that goodwill really carries far in a situation like this. And I've seen that kind of work, miracles in standard setting, in associations where, like, in a rapidly evolving space, like integrated circuitry, or rockets and automobiles. I'm thinking of SAS, and the association was able to come up with a set of standards that the individual organizations would not otherwise adopt, because they felt like, everybody should adopt my standard, and
right.
so I
Yeah.
can make all the extra money. But the association could say, look, this is what's best for the whole field to move forward. And so, and just imagine, some of our major trade associations, the size of the kind of organizations, and the number of organizations, and the talent, and the dollars that's available is much larger than it would be for a single private organization.
Absolutely.
So, I think that neutral arbiter, and then that reach and penetration into a particular sector is really advantageous.
Yeah, that diversity of perspectives, I often hear the same advantage, if you will, talked about in the context of consultants within the association industry, right? You can get, maybe stuck is the wrong word. You can be limited to a lens of your own perspective, your own history as an executive within association, and you have the blinders of you're really focused on your industry. Whereas with an outside consultant, you do get more perspectives, more purviews. They've touched, maybe reached more industries, and can give you that perspective. And I think what I'm hearing you say is the associations have that, rather than an individual private corporation that may be part of the membership.
Yes, and I really want to underline what you're saying, because actually I sometimes get paid for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
There'll be a CEO or an executive director who's pushing an initiative, and it's not getting board traction because the board are all subject matter experts in that domain,
Right.
and that's it. And what they need to hear is other associations and how they have succeeded in that space, or what are other flavors, just to broaden the thinking of the board so that they
Right.
can start to see outside the way they've always done things. And when I've worked with over 100 organizations, I can come in, and also I have a lot of those organizations, because I have good client relationships with all my past clients. I can actually call up, and sometimes I do, and say confidentially, I've got a client who's going through X. What would you do in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And then I can bring back 4 or 5 really expert opinions to my client and say, this is what others are saying, and these are some other options we should consider.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in that network, and that ability to pull the audience, if you will, or
Right.
maybe you've already done it through your own work, right? It's both history, wisdom, and opportunity, all sort
Yeah.
of combined.
And of course, one of the wonderful things about associations is that all of the CEOs talk to each other. So there's like a community of executive directors who are sharing knowledge, wisdom, mistakes, challenges, successes, and that's irreplaceable. I mean, that's gold,
Yeah,
especially if you're trying out something that you haven't done before that others have. I find
absolutely.
it really exciting to be in that, to hear people, to lunches, dinners, retreats, and they're just kind of fomenting this body of knowledge, if you will.
I'm glad you said that, and I'm gonna highlight that what you just said. And if you're listening, and you're a new association executive, or you're new to the CEO role, don't think that you're out on that island. That happens every day. The sharing within the association community itself is part of what makes it so powerful. And don't hesitate, if you're listening, to reach out to either another CEO, a consultant in the industry. There's a lot of knowledge already out there, and don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Now, you may want to make it a better wheel, but the actual construction of the wheel, if we could just lean into the metaphor, has been created 99.9% of the time. And so,
Right. Right. There's a colleague I can plug a little bit on this. That's Mary Power, who I met first as a client
Hmm.
at HR Certification Institute, and then at the Council of Better Business Bureaus. She was the CEO in both of those organizations, and then she went out on her own, and she now works especially with new CEOs of associations, and especially women. She does those are her two specialties,
Wonderful.
and she's very good at what she does. She's a very generous person. If you contacted her and you weren't a fit, she would still share what she knew with you and help you find the right person who is. But it's always nice when you have that. So here's a veteran CEO
Hmm.
who's in the consultant space now, coaching and providing support to new CEOs who are coming in. And I think that's another kind of wonderful benefit of this community of CEOs that's in the DC area.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, I want to switch gears just for a minute. I told you I saw a video of you in the snow outside your home several years ago talking about the concept of association evolution and the stages. And I just thought it was so good. I want to just bring it up again. I know that video out there, but if you could just, in a couple minutes, talk us through those three stages, and hopefully our audience get to start to think about where their association is in that evolution. And really, if you're leading an association, pull yourself out of it for a second, work on the association, not in it, and kind of understand these concepts, because I thought they were great.
Oh, thank you. So the three concepts are transactional, generative, and scalable. And transactional is kind of where all associations started, where a bunch of people pooled their money because there were things that they could do together that they couldn't do alone, like pay a lobbyist or work on strategy for the entire sector. And the idea was, I'm putting in X dollars and I'm getting X plus Y out of it. So it's a transaction for me. It makes financial sense. And I want to be a part of this larger body. And this is
Mhm.
how I want it to operate. Then you've got generative. Generative is where the association starts to actually create knowledge in its space. And most associations have moved into this already. And that's, a natural outcome of having conferences, working groups, bringing special action groups together to work on a particular area. And they might identify lessons learned or best practices and publish those. And then the association makes it available to others in that space. So you're not just transacting a financial equation, you're actually generating new subject matter expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third is scalable. And this is where the knowledge that's generated by the members is parlayed into a much broader audience. And this is what a grand challenge is. This is where you take the value that an organization has and you really roll it out at a completely different level. And you can get involved in global impact. And that's where I see associations that are really on the global stage, which is a challenging stage to be on because every country's different, really having big impact. But it can also, even inside the United States is a thriving economy, and you can do that inside the United States. You don't have to go global to do that.
Right.
But the idea is that you take the value of the association and you help it to benefit the larger world, So whatever the National Association of Manufacturers knows how to do, Jay Timmons is helping the world know how to do. And that's a perfect example of
Yeah.
scalability.
That is. Connecting the two concepts, I was writing down as you were speaking, I just finally clicked for me that, really every association probably started as its own grand challenge. I was speaking with some folks, founders of Association Latinos, actually came on the show some time ago. And when I heard them speak and talk about it, it was so much passion and their vision was very grand, but they're in a transactional state, right? They're still very much in the organizing, getting volunteers, not a lot of funding. And maybe that concept is every association. I heard lots of different numbers, 80,000+ of them are
Wow.
grand challenges, maybe in their own right. Would you agree or challenge that?
Yeah, I think in the early stages, that's true. You have a network of professionals, either businesses or individuals, and they want to achieve that kind of superorganism state where they're
Mm-hmm.
working together, to have better impact in their space. And I think that is a grand challenge initially. Yeah.
Superorganism. I like that. That's very much association. It's just this compiling of people who are getting behind a cause and a mission and getting focused and hopefully heading in the right direction and not,
Right.
dividing for unnecessary reasons.
Right. Yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly of superorganism, right? You can also be like a slime mold and head out in who knows what direction.
Oh yeah, just everywhere. That never works. Then the organism just gets really wide and flat, or you have
Right.
competing, and then you get this separation of the cells, if you were, and then they can
Yeah.
go in different directions, which could be good or bad.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
that's part of the grand challenge initially. Build to a point where you can divide. I've seen that go both ways. Well, how about Seth? A couple of fun questions. One I like to ask is, what is something that you look forward to every year? Gets on your calendar January 1, and you just wouldn't miss. You clear the way
So
on your calendar, if you will.
I'm gonna go down a personal channel with this
Okay.
one. So every summer in July or August, I take my dog and I head up to the Adirondacks in upstate New York, about 20 miles south of the Canadian border, and we go off the grid for a week. We go into the backcountry, just the two of us, and it's my time to be out of all my roles. I'm not a consultant. I'm not a father. I'm not a husband. I'm just Seth and the dog in the woods.
Okay.
And, we go swimming. There's a place I go where there's lots of swimming holes, and I watch nature. I do some spiritual stuff and contemplate, read texts that I like, enjoy, and just chill.
Okay.
And then I just came back from that a week ago, so I'm feeling re-energized and renewed. That's
That is
it.
unplugging. So many benefits of that. And is the unplugging self-induced, or is there just no internet up there at all?
No internet. There's no
Okay.
internet. Although this was the first year that my wife talked me into buying a little satellite device, so
Okay.
that if I'm in a true emergency, I can actually call for help, and that was nice to have. It made me feel more comfortable.
You got
But
Starlink or something in the
yeah,
pocket just in case. I could appreciate that,
yeah,
in
just in
the
case.
event that something went south.
Yeah.
Well, what's something about Seth we couldn't find, and maybe you just told us one, but something else that we couldn't find on the internet about Seth, and you're not hard to find. There's lots of videos. You're not shy from the camera, which I appreciate, and you got a lot of wisdom to share. But what's something about Seth we couldn't find on the internet or on your resume?
Well, that's a good one. If you subscribe to my weekly newsletter, Monday Morning Mojo, which you can do on my website, visionaryleadership.com, you know a lot about me because I share all kinds of personal stuff there. You know that I have a daughter that I adopted from India. You know that I'm studying the Bhagavad Gita. You know that I like to camp with my dog. There's
Yep.
all that gets woven into there. But something that's not been documented so far. So I am studying Hindi. So I adopted this little
Oh,
girl with my wife from India 12 years ago. She's now 20 years old. Her name is Ruchi. And I wanted to really be able to go to India with her and talk to the local people in their language. And so 3 years ago, I started studying Hindi. And I'm just at the level where I'm starting to be able to actually converse after
wow.
3 years.
I
Still,
bet. That's goodness.
we did go to India last February, and I was able to have some very brief conversations with a number of people and understand, directions and things like that. So I was proud of myself.
I studied some languages many, many moons ago, and I missed the opportunity to just go submerge myself in those communities because I heard that's really the ticket to
Oh
locking
my
it
God.
in. And so I can understand more than I can speak, but that's really interesting. Would you consider that your own grand challenge? Do you set these for yourself too, Seth?
Well, I'm 65, and I've heard that one of the best ways to stay alert for your whole life is to do something with your brain that you've never done before. So I picked learning Hindi because it's not a Latin-based language. It's completely different.
Yeah.
For me, there were two choices. It was learn a language or learn to play an instrument because I've never done either one really. And I'm saving the instrument maybe for a few years down the
There you
road.
go.
And
Phase two.
that's right. That's right. But I am learning Hindi. So,
Well, you went big. You went grand on that one because I'd heard of the instrument, and there's a whole spectrum of these things, including down to like brushing your teeth with your offhand. But I had heard the same thing. Staying sharp is there's a lot to it. There's a science to staying sharp. That's amazing.
Right.
Well, as I often do at the conclusion of our episodes here, I'd like to know, Seth, there's somebody in your network that you think our audience would get a lot of value from hearing from.
Yeah, I'd like to recommend Glenn Kreiner. He is a distinguished business professor at the University of Utah. He is a studier of grand challenges. That's one of the reasons I know him. He's been very involved with me on Stop Stigma Together. And he's also an amazing leadership teacher and coach. And he teaches, he has a lot of graduate students in the leadership space. And I think for anybody who's studying leadership or takes leadership seriously, he would be a wonderful guest. So that's who I recommend.
That'd be great. Thank you for that. And Seth, you do some incredible work, and I appreciate your contribution to associations um, in general, outside of associations. And I encourage our audience, reach out to Seth if you're thinking about a grand challenge, if you think your association's ready, or if you maybe want to reach out to Seth and plan something out, 2 or 3 years down the road, what it's going to take to get yourself in a position. I know he'd welcome the conversation. And
Absolutely.
thank you, Seth, for the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.